Your commander insists that you're fit to serve.
I am.
You struggle with your emotions, with your past which fuels them. You are just one victim of the Skrull expansion that has threatened our civilization for centuries. Imposters who silently infiltrate, then take over our planets. Horrors that you remember and so much that you do not.
And that's a clip from Captain Marvel. I'm delighted to say I've been joined by its directors and its writers. That's Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck. Hello, how are you?
Very good. Happy to be here.
So the movie is out today. Does this feel like a pressure relieved? I mean, you've been living with this for a while now.
Absolutely. It's like we've been living with this. We've been in like a dark room trying to work through this, making it as good as we possibly can.
But it's like it's been a secret. You can't talk about anything to do with the film at all and where it fits in the Marvel Universe. And now it's out there.
Yes, we can stop evading questions. Is that what you're telling us?
It still doesn't feel natural, though. It feels like uncomfortable to talk about because we have been avoiding questions for so long.
So now that you actually can, you don't want to?
I just don't know how to.
How long has Captain Marvel been a part of your lives then?
It's been 2 years ago that we were hired.
How do you get to be hired to do a movie this big?
We first have to raise our hands and say, let's have a conversation. And so that's how it starts. They announced the movie, and then they announced that they had hired Brie Larson to play Captain Marvel. And that's when we got excited because we know what she's capable of as an actor. And so we thought she could bring something really fresh and new to the superhero world.
She was one of the big draws why we wanted to kind of
put
our hats in the ring.
So do you pitch, do you contact someone and say, we want to do it? Or do they say, are you asked to put your hat in the ring?
We contacted our agent and said, can you get us to sit down with the folks at Marvel? And he said yes. And they were interviewing a lot of people. And we met with them a few times, probably like 4 or 5 times over the course of several months before they called us up and said that we had the job. And we were overjoyed and then immediately terrified.
What was your sell? What was it that you guys delivered that when you had your meetings with Marvel? Because you'd done Mississippi Grind and Half Nelson and Sugar, and it was not necessarily the obvious prequels to doing a Marvel movie.
Yeah, and I think that's what's great about Marvel is they look to directors like us, and I'm sure they looked to a lot more, but people like Ryan Coogler and Taika Waititi, they don't seem like obvious choices for the movies that they get involved with. And I think what they responded to in our movies was just the characters, the complex characters, portraits that we've done before. And so we were all on the same page about wanting to bring those sensibilities to this movie.
Can you explain what your starting point was for your Captain Marvel? Because as many people are aware, there are a whole bunch of Captain Marvels out there stretching back over almost 100 years. So where do you go with yours? What was the starting point for your Captain Marvel?
Well, Carol Danvers was initially introduced in the comics in the late 1960s, but she hadn't taken on the mantle of Captain Marvel until much later with the Kelly Sue DeConnick run of the character. And that's where
she was the writer of the
She was the writer of the comics, and particularly of the series where Carol Danvers becomes Captain Marvel. Because there are different Captain Marvels, and we're telling the story of Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel. And it's in that series of comics that we completely fell in love with this character. She's obviously one of the strongest and most powerful superheroes in the Marvel universe, as many people have already been talking about. But she also has this heart and this humanity, vulnerability. She's funny, she's edgy, she's competitive. She doesn't always make the right choices for herself. She's flawed and messy and human, and that was the character that we fell in love with and we wanted to bring to the screen. Another thing about that series of comics is just her strong relationships with other women in the comics, and those are really the focal points of the stories in a lot of ways, even more than the arch enemies and the action, and that's what we wanted to bring to the movie.
Can you explain for those who don't follow the intricacies of the Marvel Universe where this fits in? Because we're getting towards the end of a very long run of stories. It's an origin story, though it's a slightly unusual origin story. Tell us where this fits in.
It's the 1990s, so it's a pre-Iron Man, pre-Avengers world that we're visiting here.
So it's a 1990s action movie is what we're talking about, really.
Pretty much.
Okay. All right. So what you're saying is this doesn't actually have to fit in the Marvel universe because there isn't an Iron Man, or Tony Stark is alive somewhere, but he's not an Iron Man.
Exactly. And what they call Easter eggs, there are plenty of them for the Marvel fans to chew on and spot throughout the movie. But if you're not a Marvel fan, I think what's fun about this one is it really is a standalone movie. It exists on its own. You don't have to know the other movies to appreciate this film.
But for those who are following it, at the end of the last movie, we saw Nick Fury's character with his pager, and he's paging Captain Marvel. And so everyone who knows that this is in a symbolic moment goes, oh, all right, this is a symbolic moment. So in a way, this film is picking up from that moment.
Yes, but it precedes that moment by quite a lot. This is where Nick Fury and Captain Marvel meet each other for the first time. And so it's not really only an origin story for Captain Marvel. In a way, it's also an origin story for Nick Fury as we know him. This is his first time meeting an alien. This is his first time meeting a superpowered being. He's getting schooled by Captain Marvel on just how huge the universe is and what kind of threats are out there. And so it's another side of Nick Fury, and there's something fun about seeing this other side of him before he knew it all and had seen it all.
Because he hasn't seen anything. He doesn't know anything. And that's, of course, is this whole other edge to the movie. The special effects, there'll be a whole bunch of special effects people will be expecting because they know that Captain Marvel has all these powers. But what your team has been working with is making Fury... How old is he in this movie? 30?
A little older than that, maybe 40.
40.
40s, yeah.
Okay. And he looks amazing. So here we've got Samuel L. Jackson, aged 40, looking completely believably 40 years old. Can you tell us anything about that process, about how you go about making Samuel L. Jackson 30 years younger than he is?
From our perspective, it was really easy. We just had Sam show up on set and we put some white dots on his face, and those are the tracking markers. And then after we shot, we'd pick the takes that we like. That's one thing that's a little bit more unusual for this process from our other films, is that usually you finish shooting the movie and then you start getting in the edit room and putting it all together. But because the process takes so long, we really had to choose those takes early. So we would cut those scenes together long before we cut other sequences together. So we'd pick the take and then we'd send it off to this company called Lola, and they really did the de-aging process, basically hand painting frame by frame, and it's a really long, tedious process, I'm sure. So we want to make sure those takes are the right ones, because the last thing you want to do is switch a take out a month later and then all that work is for naught.
So that artwork is fantastic, but Samuel L. Jackson is still acting as a 40-year-old. You know, you can't change his gait or you can't change his style, but he still seems like a young guy or a middle-aged guy, you know.
He does have to work for us because he is so youthful. He has so much energy. He looks amazing and is in amazing shape for a 70-year-old man. It's completely insane. But, you know, one thing that was really important to everybody was making sure that as, you know, Lola is going through their process and visual effects, that we're maintaining all of the performance. We're not losing any of the specific things that he was doing or any of the nuances of that performance. And they did an amazing job keeping their eyes on that.
This is, as many people have commented, it's obviously the first Marvel movie with a female superhero in the lead. You're the first woman who's a director, co-director. The burden must have been huge anyway. You said you were scared as soon as you got the gig. But there must have been moments of when you were aware of that increased responsibility.
You know, I've spoken to a lot of directors of Marvel films, and everybody feels a certain burden just because the movies have been so successful and so good and so layered that every director comes in with a certain sense of burden. And I don't know if we really ever stopped to think hard about this being any more so than any other film that we've ever taken on. It's like we really wanted to do justice to the story. We really loved the character. We wanted to do justice to it. And yes, we knew that there were a lot more people who were awaiting this movie than any movie we've ever made by far. But at the same time, we were so busy and wrapped up in the process that if we had taken time to sit back and really think about it, our heads probably would have exploded. So we just kept moving.
So no sense of extra responsibility?
Not until now. We started talking to people and they keep asking us that question. Now we're terrified and feel a great burden.
You mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that you knew what Brie Larson was capable of. She is astonishing in the role. You had all those expectations of working with her. Does she need a lot of directing? How do you direct a woman who's being Captain Marvel?
Well, she's already just so committed that she came in so strong. I mean, she trained for about a year before we even started shooting. So physically, it took a real toll because I think she came in already exhausted, even though she was strong. She was already tired from all the training she had done. But mentally, this role required so much as well because she really goes through every conceivable human emotion in this movie. And it was a thrill to work with because, well, first of all, we didn't really have to push her that far because she's just such a great actor. She brings all of that to the table. So the way we direct isn't really pushing actors to do anything they're not capable of. It's just creating a space for actors to do what they're already good at.
Were there any moments in the making of this film over the last couple of years that were overwhelming?
Yeah, there were moments where we were overwhelmed. There was so much going on at once and we were juggling so many things that there were moments when I pushed myself, I think, to the limit of what I was capable of, just emotionally and physically in terms of the hours that I was working and how focused I was on the material. But I think that you do in any good project and anything that you really care about, you're pushing yourself to those limits, and occasionally that means getting overwhelmed.
And maybe this movie is so big it helps the fact that there are two of you. I mean, how does that divide up? Do you know instinctively which sections of the movie you're responsible for?
No, not at all. In fact, I couldn't point to anything and say, oh, that was my idea or that was Anna's idea. In fact, one of the great things about having a co-director and a co-writer is that we have these third ideas, which are not mine or hers. In fact, I'll give you one example of this. I once asked Anna a question, and she said, well, what if we tried this? And I misheard her. And I said, oh, you mean like this? And basically thought I was repeating what she said. And she said, that's not at all what I said, but that is a great idea. And so that third idea, which just came out of a misunderstanding, that kind of thing happens more often than we would probably care to admit. But it's the beauty of having a collaborator that you really trust.
And were you both given a completely free hand to tell this story? Because obviously, as we say, it has to fit in. There is another movie that comes after this. And obviously, Captain Marvel, being the strongest, is going to be like a key. Where have you been all this time? This is kind of important. Does someone else decide that? Do you have any idea how it fits into the end game? Can you not tell me?
We will say that we have no idea how it fits into any future Marvel movies, but it is a real collaboration, particularly the aspect of how this fits into the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general and how it connects in different ways, and that's part of the fun of the puzzle of it. But we always had, producers who were working with us from the very beginning, when it's even just like throwing out ideas and putting them on a whiteboard and figuring out what potentially this story could be. And then again in the edit to make sure that everything is fitting together and working within the Marvel framework.
So there'll be a producer who'll be saying, well, maybe this, or maybe a bit more of that.
Yeah, I mean, it feels very much like an open collaboration,
Sure.
But they do have the vision of what's going to be happening in the other movies.
Because she's so Captain Marvel is so fresh and so new and so powerful that you kind of think this has got to be the beginning of something, not the ending of something. Maybe you can't tell me what the answer to that is.
I mean, for sure we expect to see more of Captain Marvel. We'll say that.
And has this experience made you think that you want to stay and do more of these kind of movies? Do you think, no, we want to go back and do small movie again because then we have more control? I don't know. How has this left you, this experience?
Not because we have more control, but I think just we're open to doing a movie like this for sure. Again, we had a blast. Yes, it was exhausting, and I think we needed a nap. But I think it would also be great to make the smaller movies that we started our careers with. I think that we have a lot of fun with those, but I don't think it's about control. I think it's just about the size of it, the intimacy of working with just a much smaller crew, and that's really it.
Ryan Fleck, Anna Boden, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you so much for having us.